Hello everybody. Kayla Braxton and Paul Heyman are, you guessed it, the ultimate odd couple. Apollo is still IC champion and WWE is determined to make me look like a jerk. I'm Casualeann. Come with me. So this episode of Talking Smack from May 22nd starts with Kayla Braxton and Paul Heyman. Obviously, she asks how Paul is doing, and he says he's not a morning person, keeping with the Saturday morning charade. Kayla replies that he's probably not an afternoon, evening, or night person. And Paul feigns offense. He's like, I said nothing rude or disparaging to you. And she offers her apologies. She just wants to have a good show, and Paul answers that she is sitting next to a legend. And she doesn't need to apologize in order to have a good show. Whether they get along or not, the show will be splendid because the special counsel to the tribal chief is here. Dramatic pause. And so is Kayla. Boy, does he go on with it. Again, Paul Heyman is the unsung hero of Talking Smack. She reminds everyone that the WWE is returning to live crowds in July. They have a 25-city touring schedule through Labor Day, which is September 6th this year. The first date is going to be July 16th in Houston, Texas, the stomping grounds of WWE Hall of Famer Booker T. And this is going to be the go-home SmackDown before Money in the Bank. And that kind of explains why Hell in a Cell was moved from where it usually is in October to June, so that, Money in the Bank could be a month behind where it usually is and be in front of a live crowd. So Kayla says that Paul Heyman has to be excited for the return of live fans because all he does is yap, yap, yap in the Thunderdome. And this sets the tone for the entire rest of the episode. Everything is about yap, yap, yap between them from then on. And he says that's all he's been reduced to is yap, yap, yap. Is it easy to hide her contempt and disdain for him? She says she doesn't try to hide it. Oh, the lovely, lovely tension of it all. So Kayla tries to move on. She remarks about Bayley interrupting the Parade of Champions on SmackDown. And Paul says that they're like an old married Jewish couple. I can only imagine how many Jewish couples might find that cringeworthy. But that they've retired to Florida, they're playing shuffleboard and mahjong. Hysterical. She asks for his opinion about Seth Rollins and Cesaro. She's trying to redirect him about like an elementary school teacher would. And he asks, Miss Kayla, if he can answer. Then comes his answer. Yak, yak, yak. The dynamic between these two never fails in bringing the laughs and the cringes in equal portions. It's actually part of what made me start wanting to review these shows and that there weren't a lot of people doing it. Simply amazing. She announces the guests through nearly clenched teeth. They are Shinsuke Nakamura and Apollo Crews. The first thing that goes through my mind, other than that call, is there are only two guests. Why? We get a commercial break and Shinsuke Nakamura comes in again with the camera watching him approach to the desk, which I think is a great feature. So Shinsuke, with eccentric charisma and King Corbin's crown in tow, approaches the desk and bows to both Kayla and Paul. He's toting a white button-up shirt and black blazer, kind of an understated dapper, no tie. as you would expect a kind of kinesthetic artist to be, this understated simplicity. Kayla says that the crown looks better on him than it ever did on Corbin, and he kind of shrugs it aside. So humble. Shinsuke, of course, took Baron Corbin's crown, or King Corbin's crown, the previous Friday, after losing, which, I mean, he should have won, then taken it, but anyhow, he has won since then. So he speaks a few sentences in Japanese, and we get no subtitles. The linguist in me is absolutely delighted, to hear another language, and I get the mystique of no subtitles, but the pragmatist in me was saying, like, why no subtitles? Subtitles, please. Here's the thing. We are 23 days removed from the first show with live fans. And these are fans who, mind you, have been reminded of the what chant through the promo content for WrestleMania 2022 in Dallas. I've run my mouth about that on a previous video, so I'm not going to go into that. But, I'm a pessimist at my core, and I want everyone, despite the competitive culture, to do well. But it's a small thing to have subtitles. That way, those who understood Japanese could have just listened, and those who didn't could have just read, so that everybody gets it. And it's the same thing with Swiss German, Spanish, French, Italian, Irish, Gaelic, anything. Stop being lazy with these diverse, incredible international talents. Like, get off your rear ends and put some subtitles in. Anyway, Paul apparently understands. He says that what Shinsuke has said is going to be trending on social media the rest of the week. And Kayla asks what he said, and Paul says to ask Shinsuke a question and he'll translate. Now, I smell a gigantic male pattern baldness bearing rat, but let's see where it goes. Kayla mentions that Shinsuke had a guitarist to play for him, a theme, and she shows the Instagram footage of Shinsuke with the crown. And one of the videos involves coffee, and he's replying in Japanese. Paul isn't translating. And again, the TSL teacher in me is like, that is so rude. Translate for the man if you understand Japanese, but I know it's a work. Kayla says to the coffee video that you have to have a good cup of joe. I think she's got her Google Translate in front of her. But Paul replies that at the cup of joe remark that we don't talk about people who aren't here anymore. Of course, referring to Samoa Joe. Just like we don't talk about Charlie, and just like one day we won't talk about you. Again, Kayla is going to get fired. Paul argues. Paul at this point asks, I think, about Shinsuke and Roman going for the Universal title. Shinsuke answers, again in Japanese. And Paul says that his kingdom is in good hands and that he'll send his regards to the tribal chief. Shinsuke understands Japanese. Again, what is the point of all of this? Being trained as an ESL instructor, this is aggravating. And we're taught to have patience with such things. So I can only imagine what some segments of the WWE universe might think. Like, regardless of whether or not they'll actually speak such thoughts, like on social media or anywhere else for that matter. I understand that Americans aren't watching the way that they used to, but just the laziness inevitably makes the company look stupid, I think. A couple of sentences in another language is mysterious. It's alluring. But an entire segment with no subtitles looks idiotic. It's as if they're actively trying to alienate the rest of the non-Japanese speaking fans that they have. And as a fan of Shinsuke, that's actually a hard thing for me to say. Paul talks him up after he's gone, talks about how articulate he's been, the fact that everything was paced into sound bites, and that if he were to have a class on giving promos, that is what he would teach people. But the problem with that is, and I'll leave it after this, the problem with that is, if we don't know what Shinsuke said, then we're beholden to Heyman's word, which does have rock solid credibility, but that imposed reliance, that's crap. As a fan, you want to be able to make that decision for yourself. And I've since tried to look up translations of what Shinsuke actually said, and I haven't been able to find anything. So, I mean, at least for me, what could have been kind of an exciting build of, anticipation in a segment just kind of ended up being frustrating. So we get a much needed commercial break after that, and then the next segment is with Apollo Crews. And so going into this, I'm just hoping, please, that last segment was so draining, please have something good for us. So Apollo is still entranced by, besotted with, enamored of his Intercontinental Championship. He's looking at it lovingly, but at least it's more tame than it was the last time he showed up. But he greets Kayla warmly, asks how she's feeling, then tears a page from the Rock's book and exclaims it doesn't matter how she's feeling. It's about how he's feeling. She asks him, how does it feel to still be the Intercontinental Champion? He did successfully defend in his Fatal 4-Way match with Sami Zayn, Big E, and Kevin Owens. And he says he beat everybody's favorite superstars and that this being the IC title, is still his. So regarding the fact that the odds were stacked against him, he believes that his being a warrior, he was built for it. And that he always finds a way to come out on top. They talk about the fact that fans are going to be coming back, and he is excited that the WWE Universe will get to see their Intercontinental Champion in person. So of Aleister Black's return, kind of the proverbial elephant in the room, his interference put the match firmly in Apollo's hands. Was it planned? That's what they want to know. Apollo says he doesn't know what Kayla's talking about, and that maybe he needs to wipe the champagne from his eyes so that he can see better. He's been partying that much. He says all he sees is him still being champion, and that what she's talking about isn't relevant. And as the questions are getting piled on, Commander Aziz is getting visibly, increasingly frustrated. So Paul asks, albeit timidly, if he can speak candidly. He does his quintessential turn in the chair to get their attention, but out of respect. He says that this thing about Aleister Black and ignoring his involvement, that it's bull blank. He was trying to reach Aleister for months. He had ideas, but he got ghosted. Apollo, on the other hand, had him in his back pocket. And Apollo says he can't speak for the man, he can only speak for himself. And that he blacked out after receiving the big ending from Big E, which was nice. He kind of put him over in that way. But that when he awoke, the referee was raising his hand and he was hearing his music played. But he says he has an appointment, he appreciates the interaction, and as always, this is Apollo's sign off. He tells Aziz to fire up the jet. And just picturing this gigantic man in a cockpit in uniform, never having spoken a word, flying a jet, this is just teeing at its finest. But again, Commander Aziz has been super tense most of this segment. And as they leave, he stretches his hand towards Heyman and then pats his shoulder ever so slightly. It was absolutely terrifying and hilarious at the same time. So we get another commercial break, and segment 4 is with Paul Heyman. You're an all-star. So the plan has changed a little bit. They get more recap before kind of the monologue that Paul Heyman does. They talk about the title card with the Usos versus the Street Profits, because that's where we're gonna get in this coming SmackDown. Kayla brings up the fact that it seems that Roman wasn't pleased about Jay's involvement in the match and his attempt to kind of make history within the tag team division. And, you know, Paul retorts that, hey, he's been making history as the right-hand man to the head of the table. Granted, Jay is always losing, but okay, he's main event Jay Uso. I find it interesting that Paul is saying here that he's relegated himself to the tag team division with his brother, who has yet to fall in line. Now, this is stating openly kind of what fans already knew, which is that the tag team division is kind of bad, and that a tag team star is unfortunately not as impressive as a singles star. But he says that Jimmy will fall into line and acknowledge the tribal chief. He ran down this history of what happens to people when they challenge the head of the table on SmackDown. And he asks Kayla, what do they call WrestleMania? And Kayla gives a couple of names. You know, I think the Show of Shows, the grandest stage of them all. And finally she hits on it, the Showcase of the Immortals. Paul asks, what happened here? An immortal exploited the stage to showcase his immortality. And he gave us the WrestleMania moment of the decade in 2021. He asks if anyone is on Roman's level, and mentions that Bobby Lashley got pinned by Kofi Kingston on Raw, but that he just watched the YouTube clip because he does not watch Raw. Double shots fired, right? So putting down Bobby Lashley, basically saying he's not as good a champion as Roman Reigns, and the SmackDown is so much better than Raw that despite the fact that he's a WWE employee, he doesn't even pay attention to that other product. The whole segment being not kind of a monologue, and Kayla not having her first couple of sentences to introduce Paul Heyman and then him taking the rest of the segment, them not doing that was actually pretty refreshing also. It was nice to see Kayla a little bit in that last segment and him kind of batting her some ideas that she could hit back to him. But I would say that having a segment between just the co-host and the host recently is more a Raw thing, and I mean the first segment when I say that. I really hope that they don't start doing that every week, like with just having two guests and it just being Paul and Kayla, or Kayla and Paul the first segment, and then Paul Heyman at the last. Like a 3-guest format is the chance to have wrestlers comment on at least 3 differing storylines, their perspectives on their careers, and other storylines that don't even involve them. I've covered a full segment of recap as a weak point in previous Raw Talk reviews, and Talking Smack already has a segment dedicated to Paul Heyman. So I hope this was an isolated show and not the start of some new, worse format. To be honest, I didn't really feel compelled at first to recommend a must-watch segment, but for the sake of context and curiosity, I would recommend segment 2 with Shinsuke Nakamura. Obviously, let me know what you all think in the comments. Was Shinsuke's charisma and Paul's reaction to what he was saying enough for you? Or would you like to have known what Shinsuke was actually saying? Or if you're a Japanese speaker, let us know what impact it actually had for you. Like, just let me know what you all think. My rating for this week is 3 out of 5. I thought the banter between Kayla and Paul, as always, was hysterical. The old Jewish couple thing made me really laugh out loud. That was a definite plus. There only being 2 guests was a definite minus. Apollo did great, and of course the ridiculously long Shinsuke segment with no titles was a definite negative. So it averaged out to about 3 out of 5. I'm going to take this opportunity to tease a new series dedicated to wrestlers' entrance themes, the features musically, what impact they've had, etc. Let me know what sort of wrestlers' entrances you'd like to have covered and what the name of such a series would be. Kind of right now, I'm thinking about something like what music did for Ellipsis, but I'm open to better ideas. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. That's how my channel grows and gets recommended to others. So it really helps out when you do. Thank you all, as always, so much for watching. I'll see you soon.